Former gang members, what incident happened that made you realize you didn't want to be in a gang anymore? Brazilian here. I was a teenager in the mid 2000s. Used to hang out with a lot of other kids who were also low middle class and had a lot of time and liberty to be on the streets causing havoc. A lot of them were hooligans. In Brazil, hooligans are really common in major cities with big football teams, but it's somewhat different from those in Europe. People hang out in the torcidas organizadas, wear uniforms, sometimes carry guns, and fight over petty crap with people from other torcidas. The main goal is to beat and steal the other crew's materials like shirts, hats, flags, and this kind of crap. It's not uncommon to see people die over this ridiculous nonsense. Anyway, it was a large gang, but no one did heavy stuff, like killing people, even though sometimes someone was packing a revolver or a pistol. At least I never heard of something like that. We used to beat the crap out of other people from other hoods, though. Some of us were really violent. A lot of my friends trained martial arts just for the sake of kicking people's ass on the street. I stopped hanging around because some of my friends got arrested for attempted murder, and they just didn't give a single F even after jail. Some of them also sold weed, and I begun to wake up to the fact that crap was getting more serious. I had a lot of doubts before, after seeing people get wrecked over nothing. Like random street fights were common. I saw a couple of random dudes getting their heads stepped on, noses exploded, teeth broken, people threatening others with fire weapons. I chose to focus on school, and years later, I'm a lawyer with no criminal background, thankfully. My friends from that time are doing okay, I guess. They're alive, and I think that's a good thing, considering what they used to do and how many enemies they made. I'm sorry if I made any grammar mistakes. I'm Brazilian and rarely write in English. Not only did you do a great job translating and explaining your story, but it's awesome to hear that you went from being, in a gang to now being a lawyer with a degree. Great turnaround story, very inspirational. Story 2. Used to have a very serious drug problem. Coupled with the fact I grew up in a rough hood, it was inevitable. Basically, I needed protection and drugs. But like most people here pointing out, eventually you just get too old for that crap. Kicked my drug habit several years ago, found an amazing girl, and realized I didn't have to stay in such a dangerous spot. We moved out to the mountains, and aside from my police record and my ongoing struggle with addiction, I left those demons back in the city. For real though, you can leave your hood so easily if you want to. Took me so long to realize that. Story 3. A couple of 3 things. A. Got too old for that crap. B. Joined the army. And C. Realized, thankfully not too late, almost shooting a mother effer dead for talking crap to my boy wasn't in my best interest long term. I think back to that point and think, I did not do something so dumb. Cringy. Story 4. Not a gang member, but I grew up in a bad area. Knew gang members and occasionally moved in those circles. I'm a little drunk, so apologies if this is hard to follow. Disrespect is so serious because in that environment, your reputation is your shield and a vital indicator of your place in the social hierarchy. People joke about street cred, but it's 100% a real thing. Allowing yourself to be disrespected is perceived as an indication that you're weak. It can mark you out as a victim to prey upon, or as unreliable and therefore a liability who should be excluded from stuff, which can make your life a lot harder if you're already struggling. It's extremely difficult to move in those circles and not have a willingness to be physically violent if challenged. There's unwritten rules to it that are peculiar to specific communities. Like, for instance, in my area, you were more or less allowed to respond to an insult with nothing more serious than posturing, so long as it wasn't extremely severe. But if it was repeated, it was expected that you'd swing on them. It was actually a decent system because it allowed for tense interactions in which neither party lost face. Which is important because a lot of the time, neither party actually wants to fight and would prefer that the situation be diffused without physical violence as long as it can be done with reputation intact. Another advantage was that it let both parties gauge their commitment to saving face. You performed an action that offended me. That was inadvertent. Nonetheless, I'm obliged to make an issue of it. I have a handgun. I'm willing to escalate this situation to lethal force. I'm unwilling to take it that far. I'll accept this loss of face. It sounds absurd, but that sort of crap is actually important. Without an initial feeling about period, people often default straight to the highest level of force that they're comfortable with. I've been in both situations, and moving in an environment where you know that if you bump into someone or step on their shoes, they legitimately might kill you is indescribably stressful. It also makes being willing to do violence that much more important, because you're effectively always in a game of chicken, and if you're known to be violent enough, the number of people willing to put you in dangerous situations drops dramatically. If the entire hood knows that you'll kill someone for minor crap, the only people who will F with you in your day-to-day life are other people who are willing to kill for minor crap, of which there are relatively few. I thankfully got out of that environment and studied foreign policy at a major university, and it's honest to God not that different when it comes to deterrence policy. It's basically one big fractal cluster F of one person/group insisting to the other, I/we are willing and able to be more violent than you. Story 5. Throwaway, since I don't want any connections to my main account. I was a prospect in a motorcycle gang. Back in the days, I somehow romanticized Sons of Anarchy and found myself as a hang-around at the local chapter of a well-known club. I was pretty passive, helped where I could, and just tried to blend in as best as I could. After a few weeks, I was seeing them as friends. They seemed like regular guys. The most of them had pretty decent jobs and were well educated. Even though the parties tended to be rough, many people were beat up for fun and things like that. A few months later, I was proposed to be a prospect, got the leather, and was the happiest guy. Things turned fast. Being more inside the club meant to know more. The guys you linked to hang around with were dealing with small firearms. Nearly everyone was secretly on drugs, even though the club rules meant that you can get drunk but not high. I stood with them, because I still called them my buddies, until I was asked to steal electronics from a parked truck. Didn't want to end up in jail like my cousin, who got 3 years for stealing a simple radio. I denied, and without a warning, I got the beating of my life. They took away my jacket and said to repeat the beating if I'm ever coming back again. Story 6. A good friend of mine took a job as a go-go dancer at a bar where a member of the big, well-known biker gang worked as a guy who kept drunks from bothering her. She grew to see him as a friend and a protector. Later, she got stalked into working as a dominatrix for a dungeon they operated, where, again, they protected her from clients. They found it all very sexy and dangerous. Cool outlaw crap with tough guys protecting her. As she got in deeper, she got pressured to do some minor sexual things with clients. Not just whips and spanks, but handjobs, and she started getting scared they were going to pressure her into sex eventually. One night at the bar/clubhouse that they owned, she walked into the back and saw a couple guys essaying a girl she knew, and she went in to stop it, naively thinking she was someone they valued and would listen to. Instead, she, a 115-pound, 20-year-old, got the crap kicked out of her as a warning to never tell anyone about the essay. She fled that world so quick after that, but always got nervous when she saw any of them, and to this day, decades later, has a lot of shame about not doing more to help that girl and being too scared to report their activities to the authorities. Story 8. Not really a gang, just a crew. 7 poor, misguided youth selling drugs and robbing dealers for food and fun money. We got drunk and coked up every weekend and went partying. Then, by the end of the night, we were doing stupid crap like vandalism, and end up in someone's house kicking the crap out of them and jacking their stuff, usually drugs and other sellables. People started getting too heavy into the coke. Some got into meth. Others just wanted to try and be rappers and music producers. At that time, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I needed an income to pay some bills. I had to grow up quick. Selling drugs and robbing dealers wasn't cutting it, and I ain't cut out for that life either. I slowly started losing contact, hanging around less, quit coke and heavy drinking, started roofing, and I was out after I didn't talk to any of them for a bit. The one, my best friend who I grew up with, didn't take it too well and thought I was just a female dog and whatnot. I'm a female dog. So be it. Story 9. Time away from the set with people that cared. Family overseas. Long story short, went to my dad's dirt poor village and saw how happy they were with nothing and how hard and backbreaking daily life was, but if you didn't move, you didn't eat kind of crap. Really made me rethink my life doing dumb crap. Went back with the resolve to make it and feel I'm well on my way to doing it. Story 10. I got roped into a skinhead gang in the late 90s because I grew up in a place where white people were a significant minority. We only made up about 15% of the population, so it was a join or die situation because white loners were seen as targets for Hispanic gangs. I got roped in by the rhetoric about white people sticking together and how everything was a threat to white people, etc. I left when I realized we were doing the same crap as all the other gangs, selling drugs to our own people, defending our territory while vandalizing it and treating it like crap, all while preaching about how we were defending the white race. I realized it was all bullcrap from top to bottom. The racism stuck with me for a few years afterward. That didn't go away until I joined the military and saw that dividing along racial lines was absolute horse crap and that the real threat were the rich men in suits trying to bleed us all dry. Story 11. Committed a crime with one of my boys. I was 17 and he was 18. He got caught, I didn't. He did 5 years in jail for it and he never ratted me out. I appreciated it, but also, I was turning 18 soon and I didn't want to risk jail time for other crimes. I walked away from it and never looked back. 10 plus years later, and I'm a doctor now. I feel like I'm a completely different person. No more anger in my heart. So again, just want to highlight posts like this. If there's anyone that's listening to this or reading this that is like in a troubled time in their life and you don't know how to work through it, I just want these stories to serve as like a beacon that yes, it's never too late to turn your life around and do good. Story 12. Age. I've been in some effed up situations, but none of these deterred me. I was young and angry, and each time someone would make a move against me, my first thought wasn't, I need to stop. It was, it's time to get this person back and make them hurt worse than they hurt me. I was this way until around 21, but then I met my now wife and saw there was more to life than just walking around with a chip on my shoulder. Now I work in fashion for a mid-level label in NYC and can actually enjoy life. I keep in contact with my homies, and I love them, but you can see who stayed in that life a little too long. Some are dead, and not even from violence, from depression. They aged out of that life and found that they had no options. Couldn't find a job because of their criminal record. Didn't finish school or obtain a GED, so they couldn't even join the military. I watched them go from angry to frustrated to basically pleading for opportunities. Then, bam, gone. And these were the older guys everyone thought was cool when we were younger, but eventually we realized that wasn't the case. For the others that finished school, they're doing okay. Most work blue-collar or manufacturing jobs. They're happy for the most part, or maybe just satisfied with complacency. Story 13. My brother showed how to live that life. I was breaking up weed back when I was 10. By the time I was 15, I knew how to cut up coke. Funny thing is, my brother never taught me these things, but after he caught a charge, came out and straightened up. He met a woman, got a house, got married, and had my niece. I wasn't doing well in school at the time, so I had to work my ass off to graduate on time. I went to summer school every summer, took 2 extra classes Monday through Wednesday my sophomore year after school. I don't regret us doing our dirt. We had to do what we had to do to stay afloat, but I would never want my kid, nieces, or nephews to ever be put in those situations. Story 14. I wasn't in a gang, but started selling weed in high school, coke at 17. After a few years, I became a large cocaine dealer. I started using coke young and quit when I was 20. I found better high, heroin. Heroin took over and I sold drugs to keep living my life. I had condos, cars, motorcycles, girls, but slowly heroin took over, needed more every day and focused less on selling coke. Made less and less money, lost good friends and connections. Then, 1 in the morning at 5 a.m., my door gets broken down. I knew I was a target for the cops and robbers, so I always barricaded my door. It took them longer than normal to get in, so I had time to flush $20,000 worth of coke. Cops shot and killed my dog, who wasn't even attacking. Didn't find drugs or weapons because I kept at other locations. All in all, I got lucky, except it was withdrawal time. I had suffered from withdrawals here and there, tried to quit a few times. Locked in cell for 3 days, sick is horrible. I was in dirty jail for 2 weeks until I finally got bail. I went straight to the dealer and got heroin when I got out. Found out cops stole all my cash. I had to sell condo to pay for lawyers, which got all charges dropped. I spent the rest of savings lounging around for months. When I realized it was either start again selling drugs or try a job. A good friend of mine was a tower crane operator, and for me, and within a company who got me a union. I ended up loving the job. I was making decent money, bit not near what coke brought, so that took time to get used to and budget. Almost all friends from dealing days disappeared, except for 2 key friends. I finally quit heroin after years of struggling. Now I'm a foreman making $120,000 a year and loving it. It was a struggle, but it was so worth it to live without worrying if going to jail or not getting H and being sick. Anyone in struggle, just stay with it and fight the good fight. So worth it at the end. I still look back at the fun I had, but also the shady crap I made myself do to rise in that world, and that keeps me level. Story 15. My dad was a drug dealer, and my mom was one of those women who wanted to court a drug dealer, and then she got pregnant with me. Long story short, it wasn't a loving childhood with plenty of opportunity and support. In Britain, it really does depend on what part of the country you're in for how the gang culture works. I lived in northwest Kent at the time, which was practically London, but just not as built up. I joined a multiracial gang while I was still in school, which meant I spent most of my time drinking alcohol, smoking weed, and carrying a knife. Our gang had a particular focus on violence and antisocial behavior, with the usual turf wars descending into beat-em-ups. We used to hang out on the tallest hill in our area and an abandoned set of flats right next to it. Our famous moments were two particular incidents. One was the arson attack on the abandoned flats, which burnt the place to a fine crisp. Rumor was it was one of our own who, seeing the gang was falling apart, decided to torch the place, and the other was when they sent the riot police to deal with us. The riot police incident was the beginning of the end. What had happened was every single one of us turned up on the hill for a party, about 100 or so of us, so we were all drinking, and then all of a sudden 4 police vans turned up at the bottom of the hill and started marching up with shields raised. I grabbed a drunk buddy and left with everyone who actually had a future ahead of them, but the police were combing the streets for everyone. Me and my drunk buddy hid in someone's front garden for most of it. I heard that in the end, one of the up-and-coming members of the gang decided to lead half of us into the town under the premise, "They can't arrest us, we haven't done anything wrong." You can probably guess how that ended, but yeah, they all got broke up and packed into those police vans for public disturbance offenses. Later on, the gang got so large that we were pretty much pariahs in the community, not to mention the target for every single gang next to us. Cue lots of us fighting and a bit of non-lethal stabbing. In the butt, basically, or with short-bladed knives. None of us were stupid enough, like today's kids, to go down for murder by machete. And that's not even mentioning the real killer, inter-gang rivalry. Large gangs normally aren't smart enough to be so organizational that they stay centralized. And we were no different, so we had 10 people all claiming they were the head of the gang, and you didn't have a choice on what side you were on. You were just automatically affiliated. It all came to a head when one leader brought in a bunch of people from London and another member who said he was a leader and brought up a bunch of people from a more violent gang, who we were on and off with, to back him up. We were pretty much on the edge of all splitting up and becoming a bunch of all new gangs, but then the arson attack happened on the abandoned flats, and that's when the police had enough and stationed police on our turf. In the end, the new small gang I was in was under attack on the daily, and I had never been beaten up so many times in my life, which was deserved. It's not like I would have done any different in their shoes. In the end, we laid low, drew a huge effing big line between us and our cousin gangs, which appeased our old enemies, which meant we could actually walk on the streets we lived in, and then moved on with our lives. I returned to Scotland for a long while, got married and educated, came back, and thankfully, no ever recognizes me. Story 16. Was with a local youth biker gang, although calling them bikers is an understatement. These guys are what happens if the Antifa and Hell's Angels had a psychopathic child. They were absolutely insane, with all their loud AF motorcycles roaming a dense urban neighborhood and having turf wars with rival gangs almost bi-monthly. I didn't do much biker gang activities other than hang out with the members, who attended the same school as me. Many considered me one of them, even though I didn't have any motorcycles and can't drive to save my life. One day I was hanging out with them. Their base of operation, which was an abandoned school building, was attacked by a rival gang, and they went absolutely berserk. One thing in my country was that gun ownership is essentially non-existent, so we have to make do with whatever we have at home. Kitchen knives, machetes, modified baseball bats, and a bike gear strapped with a piece of cloth. Due to me not being a member, my friends told me to just stay back and stay away from the windows as the rival gang members were throwing rocks at it. A few minutes passed and I couldn't help myself to at least take a peek as to what was happening. And I realized it to be a big mistake when I immediately saw one of the people I know swung a machete at a young man's head and split his skull open, and another dead body with the aforementioned cloth-wrapped bike gear sticking out of his face. We went back home immediately after that, but boy, did that experience put a scar on yours truly's brain. We still hung out a few times after that, but luckily it happened a few months before my high school graduation, and I managed to cut ties with basically all of them. So for any gamers out there, did anyone else get major The Last of Us vibes from just listening to this story, from the crafting the weapons and how people are just going nuts and attacking each other? Total chaos. That's terrible. Story 17. I was never initiated, but in the 6th grade, I moved to town with a heavy gang presence, and everybody had some form of affiliation with a local gang. The middle school I went to was a Crip school. How silly is that? And I wanted so hard to fit in and be accepted, so I started hanging out with questionable kids. My locker mate convinced me to start selling weed out of our locker, and the whole thing felt so wrong. After doing it for a few months, he wanted me to officially be jumped in, and being someone who grew up in a house of women, single mother, 2 older sisters, I've never been in a fight in my life, and I was terrified at the idea of 8 people jumping on me. So I told my mom, and she immediately pulled me out of school, and we moved a few weeks later. I found out a year or so later that the kid who I was selling weed for was shot and killed in a robbery gone wrong at 14 years old. Every once in a while, I look back at that time and think about how radically different my life would be if I had stuck with it. Story 18. I was never in a gang, but I was always around and have gotten offers, for lack of a better term. Now, I wouldn't do it for obvious moral reasons. However, back then, it wasn't even that. The reasons I always said no was because I saw it like a pyramid scheme. I didn't have the verbiage for pyramid scheme, but the idea was there. I wasn't going to put in all this work on the ground for scraps. Kind of effed up thinking about what could have been with the right offer. I was still a very book-smart kid, so I would have come around anyways, but still. Story 19. My dad used to be a Crip back in Houston, Texas. Made great friends with folk as well. At 16, when my mom got pregnant, he proposed and quit the gang life. To this day, he won't talk about how he did it, and I know through my own experience that you don't just get in and you can't just get out. I know he had to have done something he wasn't proud of, but after 9 years of hell with an unruly, tyrannical monster of a woman, 1 miscarriage and 2 babies later, it fixed him up. He dipped out, but he remarried into a family that loved him, where he wasn't the black sheep, to a woman with children he could be a father to, close to home so he can be with his mother and father and his own siblings. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes things work out for the better and worse. And sometimes it's okay to make mistakes and learn what is right. Story 20. One day, as we had 100 times before, we walked into a grocery store. We each grabbed a 30-pack of beer or a couple bottles of liquor, and we walked right for the door without paying, basically daring someone to try and stop us. But this time, there was a new girl working. She ran over and shouted, "Stop!" and grabbed my friend by the arm. We all froze. My friend slowly turned his head to look at her hand as if it was a fly that had landed on him. Without moving a muscle, he looked her in the eye, and in a cold voice I had never heard him use before, he said, "Female dog, you had better effing let go of me." Suddenly, she seemed to realize the reality of the situation. She threw her hands up and jumped back a step, her face a mask of fear. The terror I saw in her eyes, the loss of innocence that accompanies the realization that there are bad people who will hurt you for doing the right thing, it broke something inside me. Immediately, I was crushed with guilt and sadness over making someone feel that kind of fear, and I knew that I did not want to be that person. We walked off, all bravado and laughter and backslapping, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I made an excuse to go home. That was the beginning of the end of my crappy street punk days. I ended up getting a job, which I threw myself into, and I saw my friends less and less. One day, I realized I hadn't talked to any of them in months. These days, I'm a pretty boring guy, approaching 40, full-time job, wife and kid, the usual. My old friends, one of them is dead, OD'd, one is homeless and lives in a park, one is still struggling with addiction and trying to be a father, and the rest I couldn't locate or find anything about. I feel lucky to have gotten out when I did. Story 21. I was in a triad and a big underworld war erupted, causing the end of so many friendships and brotherhood by blood spilling in senseless orders that made no sense and did not benefit anyone. Not even the leaders. It was pure unjustified hate, just because someone pulled the trigger on someone else. It didn't align with my goals, and I left when they were disarrayed. I've only joined when I was younger to have the right amount of backup in case of having to protect my siblings and keep my single mother away from having to worry about people disturbing her kids whilst trying to learn to take over a company from my father's passing. It's been over 14 years now, and I've not been contacted or recognized for it. Best decision and move ever. Story 22. Was a punk teenager who hung out with friends who became neo-Nazis. I wouldn't say I was full-fledged with them, but some of their ideals rubbed off on me no matter how contrary I naturally was to it. Anyways, a few large group fights later, backing up my buddies, bashing a few heads and stuff, I just realized, what the hell am I doing? I wasn't a Nazi. I didn't hate these people. I was defending trash human beings I called friends and defending ideals that I knew deep down I didn't agree with. Stopped hanging out with that group and straightened myself out. Story 23. I was a drug mule for a small gang out in Southern California when I was a kid, 13 years old when I started. It was all good for a few weeks. Pick up a backpack, walk it down into the next city, meet someone at their house acting like a kid going to see a friend, and make a hundo each time. Then one day I was met by two guys on my way to a drop. I didn't know them, but figured something came up and they were told to meet me halfway. My stomach curdled because I knew something felt off, but I followed them anyway. Got into a car and drove down to some house near the beach where the guy I was supposed to meet was sitting out front. We go inside and everything seems normal. They ask for the bag and I hand it to them. They grab it and look inside and then start beating the crap out of the guy I was originally supposed to meet. I about crapped myself and wanted to run, but I was too afraid to even move. Ended up being shoved out of the house into a car and dropped off in a town not too far from where we were with no idea what had just happened. Turns out I was incredibly lucky because it was another gang who had caught on and took the goods and spared me any real trouble. After that, I was showing up to help those guys. I don't want to be beaten to death over this crap. I feel I was lucky enough to get out there completely unharmed. Story 24. Not really a gang, but my group of friends were known as problems to avoid, and we regularly got into brawls with other similar groups from other neighborhoods in the city. Sold drugs, burglarized houses, crash innocent parties, and rob everyone, etc. One night, I was out on a first date with an amazing woman I met through a mutual friend. The mutual friend knew me outside of that social group, so this poor woman had no idea it was dangerous. Apparently, an enemy spotted me, because when we walked out to the car, another car full of people was waiting and emptied a clip at us as they sped out of the parking lot. Felt like such a loser explaining to this traumatized woman I was super into why a car full of guys just shot at her. It really tore me up how she could have been killed because of my low-life ass, and soon moved to a new city to start over. Put all my energy into positive actions and took one day at a time. Story 25. My extended family reached out and expressed how much they loved me, so I left the country after a few months. My overseas family has come out of poverty now and are sort of rich, but there's still poverty everywhere. I saw kids do insane crap for the privilege of grade school, like walk to school in a poisonous snake-infested field, or walk 5 miles there and back every day. I saw the beggars and the laborers. My aunt hired me a cook, so I could experience local cuisine. This man works 51 weeks a year, 1 week off. He works 7 days a week. He likes to drink 1 or 2 beers every year during his week off. A beer every year, and he was so happy, excited that his wife was having a kid he sees for 1 week a year, if he can manage to keep finding work. When I left, I understood how effing hard some people work for the privilege of school that I take for granted, or just to effing survive. I have my bachelor's now and I'm going for my master's and haven't looked back. I try and help 2 of my homies. One got his GED and I'm trying to convince the other to do trade school or something. Story 26. We grew too big. At some point there were over 100 members in cities I hadn't ever visited. I was becoming responsible for a bunch of unknown people, so I gave leadership to my second and left them to their own devices. It was a good thing. They went out of control and eventually what was left became an enforcement arm of the local cartel. Story 28. I hung out with some questionable people as a teenager. One day in the park after school, a gang that some were friends with came by and were jumping in new members. I was sitting up in a tree and watched one of my friends get his ass kicked and jumped in. He stood up with the nastiest looking swollen bloody eye and then they look at me like, "Come on, you want to be next, right?" I said, "Hell no." I stayed in the tree. Story 29. My cousin killed a guy. It didn't matter that he deserved it or not, and I wasn't even there. It upset my auntie and my mom. I did really enjoy being in a group like that, though. I'm not even sure you could call it a gang, just a loose group of gypsy traveler lads who got drunk and got into fights in the local parks and stuff. Sometimes with each other, but usually with other guys. Anyway, he was slightly older than me, and he and a group of them kicked this guy in the head. He got jail for life, but then got let out on parole after maybe 10 years, which didn't seem like a lot, but he was young when he did it. Looking back, a lot of my old friends are dead now, mainly through car accidents. I stayed in school and went to university even. Story 31. Wasn't in a gang, but I used to hang around a lot of people who were. I stopped after one of them, who wasn't really my friend, but I was around quite a bit, went to rob a dealer and ended up shooting and killing him and his friend. The dealer's toddler was in the apartment too and was shot as well. He didn't die, but was paralyzed. I went to school with guys that died. It was just sad and senseless. It made me feel sick to think about associating with anyone who would shoot a baby. Story 32. My grandmother started an after-school gang prevention program back in the day in the town she lived in. The gangs were made up of young men, roughly in their late teens. In the town, there were two main rival gangs, and she worked on bringing them together and make peace. Over the years, she still kept in contact with many of the members who are still around, and I've met them multiple times throughout my life. I can't personally speak to what they felt and gone through in their lives, but since they've left that lifestyle, many have gone on to do well for themselves. The former members of both gangs and my grandmother are currently writing a book on the whole experience in hopes of showing there are other options out there and how it affected them. This doesn't really answer the question, but I thought it was relevant, and the book should be coming out soon. Story 33. Definitely wouldn't call it a gang, and I'm not comfortable disclosing details, but some friends and I had interests we looked after for a couple of years. Not often, but sometimes there were adverse parties, and neither of us wanted law enforcement to be involved. Whatever your hustle, if you do it long enough and well enough, the world gets bigger and bigger. Nothing changes by staying put, and you'll always be pressured to move forward. That almost always means higher risks. Eventually, the handful of us decided individually that we didn't want, or weren't willing, to make that jump. It was an easy choice for me. I wanted different, and sometimes I wonder if the ease of my decision helped the fellas make up their minds too. Thankfully, we all managed to step away without any baggage. These days, we just share memes in a group text thread. Story 34. I'm a former gang girlfriend. I dated someone in a gang, and I don't think people talk about how hard it can be for us to leave too. A lot of the time, we don't even know that they're a part of the gang, but we just don't question the drugs or money. Eventually, we figure it out, and by that point, we either run or stay. Most stay because they figure they haven't gotten in trouble yet, and they like the drugs and stuff that comes with it. For the most part, I mainly just acted as a front. My name got out on thing. I was the one who carried things for drops. I met up with random people when my ex stayed in the car. While we think they love us, they really just love how we make it harder for them to get caught. I left when I realized I was so hooked on blow, I'd F any of his friends to get some. I wasn't in a good place, and they definitely took advantage of it and masked what I thought was a better life with drugs and money. When I left, I deleted and blocked everything and basically didn't leave my house for a few months. They basically had isolated me so much when I was with them, I had to start over when I left. Story 35. Gangs don't help you or your family when you're in jail. There's no structure. Italian and Russian and Irish gangs, they call them mobs, have a partnership with police, and the Fraternal Order of the Police, FAC. So they have protections, tip-offs, bribes, gambling rings, loans. Street gangs lack discipline because there's no window to any other source of money like the multiple MOBs have. In my youth, I was fortunate to leave with my life. Well, most of it. I still have the nightmares. Stay away from mobs and gangs. Story 26. My mother joined the blood gang. I was bullied in school and didn't defend myself. She got word from friends and other family that went to the same school as me. She wanted to be a kingpin type drug dealer. Someone owed her money. I was doing homework when she first came to get me. She told me, "You're going to do me a favor." I said, "Okay, sure. What is it?" She told me, "Someone owed me money and I know I'm not going to get it back. You need to return my money to me." I attempted to ask her, how was I going to get it back if you know you aren't going to get it back? But she cut me off and said, "Find a way and don't come back until you got it. And make sure to send my regards." I said, "Okay," and left. I was about 13 to 14 years old. I left and didn't return for 1.5 days. It was really from after school to midnight the following day. I was tired and hungry. I thought my mom kicked me out, but I had no idea what she was really meaning. Unknown to me, she sent 2 gang members to see what's up and where I was and to make sure I did what she asked. I was sitting in an alley when they came to get me. They told me, "Did you do what your mother asked?" I said, "How do I do that?" I then said, "I'm hungry and I don't know where to go." She kicked me out. They told me, no, that's not what she said. They took me to get something to eat, then we proceeded to the person's house. They told me to, quote, knock on the door, so I did. The person she was looking for came to the door and opened it and asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" Before I could answer, the two gang members charged into the house while saying, "Stay here." They called me into the house about 5 minutes later and told me, "Remember what your mom said?" I told them yes, and they told me, "Get to it." I walked into the room to see the man tied to a chair with tablecloths, and he was yelling, "Why are you doing this? I have money, I'll give you anything. Just don't hurt me." The guy had a bat by the door, I guess, and one of the two gang members handed me the bat and said, "I want you to take this bat and hit him with it." I hesitated at first. The gang members that told me to hit him with it grabbed me by the arm and swung the bat while it was still in my hands. We hit him on the upper shin, and the guy yelled out in pain. I felt startled by his yell. That gang member told me to do the other side, and that if I didn't do it properly, he was going to do the same to me. Confused as to why they said that to me because we were family, I said, "You wouldn't do that to me, right?" The second gang member pulled out a gun and said, "If you don't do this, then I'll kill him, and we will say it was you." Terrified, I began to hit the man in the chair in the leg repeatedly. I didn't realize I broke his leg until blood splatter was on my face. His entire leg was bloody. The guy had passed out, and so did I. I woke up in my bed, trembling from fear of being figured out. I threw up several times. I haven't done anything like that before. I don't know what happened to the guy after that. I realized my mother was dangerous, so I left and went to stay with another family member, and never told them, but they kinda knew already. I stand up for myself now, but I always think about what I had done. It never really leaves you. Story 27. My friend answered this, so this is his side. Being in a gang was rough. You never know when someone can get shot and who will protect you in the future. One time I was asleep in my house when another gang broke in and shot me a couple times, and they robbed my stuff. I thought it was another gang, but it was my own gang that betrayed me. I left the bad area, got my college degree done, and got rid of my past life and got a job and happily making $70K USD a year. Not a lot, but more than enough for me. Story 28. I got into more gang-related things when I was 15 to 16. I went to school for 1 month of 11th grade. During this month, I was talking with known Crips, and we set up to have me jumped into the local gang. My parents passed me back and forth, so when the time came to get it done, my mom got tired of dealing with me and sent me to live with my dad. They placed me in Job Corps at 17, circa 2005, where I associated with all types of gangbangers and dealers. From there, I was a known Crip to all who went into the program due to my associations and mannerisms. There was a wave of us who formed a chapter off the Five Deuce Hoover set out of Houston. I was also a main player in that. The thing about Job Corps is that it's federal property, so when you get in trouble, it's federal consequences. Being the person I was, I used my skills to open a locked classroom door because everyone was complaining about not sitting in there and sleeping if they wanted. Instructor came back and 2 female dogs snitched my ass out in a heartbeat. I was met with an officer and leader of Job Corps who threatened me with B&E and a myriad of other things. Being semi-smart and silver-tongued, I was able to work my way through that one. After I left the office, I put out office to everyone that I was looking for these 2 girls. They left campus and never came back that day. They joined the military and left the area, which was for the best in my opinion. It didn't change my ideology. I stopped the Crip thing after my son was born and haven't done with it since. I can explain Job Corps more in depth if anyone desires to know. The user Crappler319 explains things pretty well, and I seen it firsthand rooming with multiple members of different gangs and sets. I got into beef with a few people, and it came down to who's going to back down first. There were areas we could go, due to camera blind spots, and stage fights in order to settle things if need be. I never escalated things that far, but I was more the thinker and strategist of a group. I paid people off to do things for me. Story 29. My brother was the leader of a street gang. He's 9 years older than me, and at the same time was trying to raise me because our parents were barely home and sucked at being parents. The pressures of wanting me to meet his friends and spend time with him, which meant doing drugs and posing with guns before 2nd grade, while not wanting to be a horrible influence on me and ruin my life, eventually topped with an overdose in 2012 when I was in 6th grade, led him to leave to the next state over and not hit anyone up. Sometimes his old friends still hit me up trying to get to him through me, but I learned the hard way not to open those messages, lol.